Hello and welcome to Coffee with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Mama. Guys, if you like this podcast, if you like the show, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. It really does help bring the algorithm up, and I really do appreciate it. Today's episode is a difficult one, and that's exactly how I knew I need to do it. Nathan Spireti is my guest. He is an actor, he is an author, and he's an activist. However, Nathan's story is a difficult one. It might be hard to listen to, and therefore this is a trigger warning. It contains themes of molestation and child abuse, and it is something that Nathan so openly shared of his own experience. And therefore, I really, really, really want you guys to listen. Please don't click off, because there's so much value to be had here. I am a believer that if we do not have the difficult conversations, we allow terrible things to continue to happen. And I don't want us to be a part of the problem. I want us to be a part of the solution. So, without further ado, here's my guest, Nathan Spiteri. I was too early. I was so excited to speak to you that I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to move it an hour earlier.
So it's all your fault.
It is my fault. It is. How are you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I've got a lot going on at the moment, so it's keeping me busy. I'll be in Australia probably through to February, and then I'll go back to New York after that. And I don't know if you know or if I've told you, I'm organizing a global march for child sex trafficking. I had an interview in New York probably about a month before coming back to Australia. And I'm a global ambassador for child sex trafficking through the CLF, the Child Liberation Foundation. And I was just pouring out some statistics that 10 million kids are sex trafficked every year. It's the fastest growing industry in the world. There's more kids and there's more slavery in the world today than there ever has been in the history of the world. So, and I'm like, this is a shit we need to be marching for. This is a shit we need to be raising awareness about, these poor kids. And it's the fastest growing industry because you sell drugs once, you sell cocaine. The drug industry is the highest industry, is the largest industry. But, you sell cocaine once, you sell heroin once, but these kids, people are selling them 10 times a day. So it's $1 billion industry, and 80% of clients are Americans. And it's, it's a huge thing. So whilst in America, I'm like, this is the shit we need to be marching about. This is the shit we need to be talking about and raising awareness. And so I got off the phone, or the interview was done, and we said to each other, let's fucking do this. Let's organize a march. So we said, let's just do it for New York. And I'm like, you know what? No, fuck that, because it's such a global thing. It needs to be a global march. So we were doing it with our PR team. Me and the interviewer are doing it with our PR team. We've got the same kind of PR team. We have a meeting every second week, every Friday, with some UN representatives. I think we have already Germany, Belgium, Holland, Australia, America. I'd love to get South Africa on board if you want to come on board and kind of help with that and really raise awareness. So our one sheet is pretty much done. We're going to start handing it out to sponsors and people who want to get involved within the next week or two. We've organized it for the 11th of April next year. So we've still got some time, and we did it for April next year because winter will be done in America. Summer will be done here in the Southern Hemisphere, so it won't be too hot. It won't be too cold. Hopefully Corona will be under control. Black Lives Matter. There's so much shit going on in the world today that we want to have this as a standalone event. It deserves to be a standalone event away from everything else. And I'm not taking anything away from everything else that's going on, obviously. But, it's the fastest growing industry in the world and no one fucking knows about it.
Wow.
So I just wanted to let you know before the interview, because if you want to touch on that in the interview or whatever, or I'd love to speak to you outside of this and see if you.
I'm not cutting out this. This was gold.
I was recording already.
Yes.
Oh, okay, shit. Okay, all right, we're on. So yeah, no, it's the fastest growing industry in the world, and no one knows about it. So we're organizing it for April. We're getting sponsors and corporate sponsors and whatever we can get, just, people who want to join, charities and activists and celebrities. So, you know, it's either go big or go home. So we really want to do it right and go big and do it properly. And so that's kind of where we're at with all of that stuff. And I'd love, you know, we're looking for people in South Africa or Africa in general to kind of help promote it there, because I know it's a big thing in Africa and South Africa, and it's a big thing all over the world, let's say. But the more countries we get on board, the more people we get involved, obviously the bigger, the better, the more the message is going to be put out there. The more, you know, we can hopefully make a change. We can, you know, obviously it'll never ever stop. And that's kind of, people always ask that about me and child abuse. Do you think you'll ever be able to stop it? And absolutely not. We're never going to be able to stop it. But if we can save one life, if we can stop one person from doing it, if we can stop one person from killing themselves, and that's been my message and my journey all along from the very beginning. If I can, through my message and through my story and through what I'm doing, if I can stop one person from killing themselves, one person from going down the road of sex and drugs and violence like I did, or if I can stop someone from maybe abusing a child themselves, then my job is done. That's what this is all about for me. Obviously it's gone a lot bigger than that. Which I never really thought, or it's, you know, it's something I never thought I'd be doing or a road I'd be going down, but it is. And I've accepted it and I've taken it on, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Whoa. I mean, that was a great way to actually just dive right in. And like you did my job for me. Thanks, Nathan. We can call it a day.
Right.
No, but you touched on a lot of different things, and I'm going to touch on them individually. But first, something that jumped out to me, when you say it is the biggest industry in the world and it is growing at such a rapid rate, for me, the first question that comes to mind is, with all the social media, with all this attention to everything going on in the world, how are we so oblivious? How don't we know this?
I think because it's not the biggest, it's the fastest growing industry. I think drugs is number one, but but child sex trafficking is slowly getting there. And they say within a year or two, it should be number one in the world, which is just mind boggling. And absolutely, like you said, I think because a lot of it is done on the dark web, which a lot of us don't have access to or don't know. And the people involved, some of the people involved, and I need to watch what I say here, but some of the people involved are very powerful people with money and power. So, you know, money goes a long way. And if you can shut people up, or if you pay the right people, you can get what you want. You can do what you want in this world. And you know, I think we've known that with not just this, but with everything. So, you know, yeah, absolutely. I still don't know how it's not a bigger thing out there. And I guess the whole, you know, Jeffrey Epstein thing has kind of shed a lot of light on it. And a lot of people are now more aware of it because of that whole saga that's going on. And some of the people that are allegedly involved. So, you know, it's a big thing. And that's why this march is so important, because the more we do raise awareness, the more we do talk about it, the more we do put it out there, then the more people are going to know. We are going to educate people. People will hopefully try and stop this, or you know, try and put a stop to it, or you know, raise awareness, make some noise. And that's what we're doing it for. That's what we're in it for.
Yeah. Oh, I have to be honest, when I was preparing for your interview, out of all the interviews I've probably done over my career, this was the most difficult one for me to prepare for. I think for a number of reasons. You know, the conversation in and of itself is a difficult one. It's one where none of us really want to even think or imagine that the world has the scope, right, of hurt. I mean, we do know about pedophilia. We do know about this, you know, sex trafficking world. However, I think most people don't speak about it because it just is so uncomfortable, right? We don't want to actually think that in this world that we actually may not be able to protect our children. We may not be able to protect those we love, right? And so it even brought up things for me where I was like, man, I mean, I teach forgiveness. I speak about forgiveness. And your story is just so big for me. So I want to actually go back. Yeah, go on. You were going to say?
No, absolutely, please.
Yeah, so I just want to go back to the beginning because you're an actor, and you a model. And so in your career, like what brought you back to telling your story and what is your story?
Should I tell my story first, and then I guess I'll tell what brought me back to it. My story is that I was abused as a kid. I was raped as a child from 8 years old through to about just as I turned. I think it was just as I turned 8, because it was over the summer holidays here in Australia. I grew up in Australia, in Canberra, or a little town just outside of Canberra, and Canberra's the capital city. So I grew up in a small town of about 20,000 people, called Queanbeyan, which is just outside of Canberra. Um, and it was a safe little great town. No one ever thought anything. And back then, talking about the 80s, all of my friends and my parents as well would send us out as kids during the summer holidays and say, get out of here and don't come back, or come back when it's dinner time, or come back when it gets dark. So we used to go out and ride our bikes and go to the local swimming pool and do what we did as kids. So one day I went to the local swimming pool with my sister, but she left early with her friends. I stayed there pretty much to the end. I was one of the last people there. I got followed into the change rooms by a man, and he kind of cornered me in the shower and raped me in the shower. Um, so from that, as soon as that happened, I guess the grooming and the manipulation started, because the first thing he said to me was that if I tell anyone, he'll kill me and he'll kill my family. So as an 8-year-old kid, especially, we're taught, like I said, we're talking in the 80s, where there was no social media, there's no internet, there's no phones, there's no nothing. There's no access to help like there is now. You don't go out and talk about this stuff. It was very taboo and very sweep it under the carpet and don't want to know about it. Exactly what you were saying about the whole child sex trafficking. It's still it's a touchy subject and people don't want to know about it. So back in the 80s, obviously it was 10 times worse. So that happened, and through the grooming and the manipulation, he told me he'll come and find me. He told me that if I tell anyone, no one's going to believe me, that my parents hate me, that my brothers and sisters hate me, that they'll all think I'm a liar. And this progressed over the years. He told me if I tell the police, or if the police find out, I'm going to go to jail and he's going to be fine. So it's I guess it was so constant and so in my head, and just a constant grooming, manipulation, the lies, that I believed it, and I thought, okay, I have to keep it a secret my whole life. So it went on from about 8 years old, very violent, through to about 12. So it was about 4.5 to 5 years, 4 to 5 years, and then he kind of just disappeared out of my life. So from 12 through to about 15, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was in the world, where I belonged. Am I gay? Am I straight? Who do I belong with? Do I belong with this man? Do I belong with my family? So that was a very trying time for me, and me just trying to work out where I belonged and who I was in this world. And depression was coming on already. And I was really, spending a lot of time on my own in my room, playing with my cars or just watching movies and keeping away from everyone. I pushed my family away. I pushed my brothers and sisters, my friends. As soon as someone got close, I built up that wall and didn't let you in. I couldn't communicate with people. I didn't trust. So from about 15 years old, 15 through to about 30 years old, in Australia, but then later on in New York and in America, I used to ride my bike and then eventually get in my car and go to the kind of industrial part of my town. And there are a lot of, sex clubs or not sex clubs, but where you can buy porn videos and all that type stuff. And there were a few gay clubs and gay cruise lounges. So from about 15 years old, I would sneak into these gay cruise lounges and did what I did with these men, but then I would beat them up, bash them, rob them, do what I could to get my power back. And that was my fuck you to the world. That was my way of getting my power back. That was my way of feeling alive, because from 8 years old through to 17 was the first time I had sex with a girl. So from 8 through to 17, it was just kind of me being raped and me being beaten up and abusive sex with men. And that's all I knew. So, so I needed to feel that feeling again. I needed to feel that because that's what gave me power. That's what gave me life. That's what made me feel loved. So, that went on for, 15 years, however long, 15 through to about 30 years old. So about 15 years. And then a lot of drugs got involved, or, I got into a lot of drugs, cocaine and pills, but then, I went on to smoking crack and shooting heroin a few times. And, I was really hitting rock bottom. I was in New York studying acting. I got invited to go over there to act. And so I was studying acting, finished my 2 years school of acting, and then was out in the streets and trying to survive. And, I kind of moved to New York to try and get away from my life here. But, I'm not sure if you've been to New York, but for anyone who's been to New York, it's the center of the world. You can get what you want, when you want, how you want it. And drugs in New York are a lot cheaper than they are in Australia. So it was a lot more accessible to me, through the people I was hanging out with and through my work. So a lot of drugs, a lot of violence, a lot of drinking, sex. And then I kind of hit rock bottom. I almost, killed myself and killed someone else. And from that, I finally told someone. I told my best friend over there. I went and met with her in a cafe, and it was crazy. It was like it was yesterday. I still remember it was like it was yesterday. She kind of was done with me, told me she wanted nothing to do with me anymore, because I was just going down the wrong way, down the wrong path. And, we're both in acting school together, and, she was concentrating on her acting career and trying to get going with that. And as I was, but I was still manipulated by everything else. So she told me she wanted nothing to do with me. It was just after my birthday. I was just a mess of a person. So we went to the cafe. I said, please, please, please meet me. Just meet me this one time. I need to tell you something. So we went to the cafe. It was the middle of winter. We're in the middle kind of, I guess, table in the whole cafe, and was surrounded by people. And she's like, what do you want? What the fuck do you want? I'm done with you. And I couldn't get it out. And she was about to stand up and go. And I just blurted out, I was raped as a kid. And then, she sat back down, and we kind of just got into everything. And I kind of told her everything. But I must have been so emotional, and I was crying, and I must have been speaking really loud, because literally every single table around us was just staring and listening and watching. And I'm like, holy fuck. But as soon as I did that, it was such a weight off my shoulders. It was like a new life. Through that, she helped me get therapy. She found a therapist for me. So I went to therapy. Then through therapy, I did group therapy. I did AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Sex Anonymous, continue with therapy now. And then just through that, I learned about myself and who I am and what I was as a person, and Stockholm syndrome, where you feel love for your abuser, again through the grooming and the manipulation. And I guess the reason why, back to your original question, why I did this and how I had to come out about it, was because I was going to kill myself. I was going to kill myself. I was going to kill someone else. I was going to end up on the street, end up in jail, end up with AIDS, because I didn't care. I wanted to catch AIDS. I wanted to get beaten up. I wanted you to beat the absolute fuck out of me, because I was done. I wanted to get out of here. I didn't want to be here anymore. But then, yes, I did the therapy, and I did the group therapy, and that saved my life. I can say that hands down, therapy saved my life, and just being able to talk about it, and being asked the right questions, and having these therapists work with me, and for me to learn about my relationship with this man, my relationship with my family, my relationship with friends, and all my relationships. I've never had a relationship with a man. It's always just been with women, but I needed to do what I needed to do with men, because that's what gave me my power and made me feel alive. And, I've been questioning, am I gay? Am I straight? Am I bi? I haven't done anything with a man in a long, long time. And all the sex and stuff I had with men there was never any intimacy there. There was never any holding hands, touching, kissing, caressing. It was just the act, because I needed to feel that act again, because that's all I knew. Whereas when I'm with a woman, it was all about I want to hold your hand. I want to touch you. I want to kiss you. I want to caress you. So I had that love for women. I had that, you know, I wanted to be intimate with women. So I needed to get the help. I needed to come out. I needed to speak about what happened to me. Otherwise I wouldn't be here with you now. Otherwise I don't know where I'd be. Um, and it's been a journey, you know, it hasn't been easy. Let's say that, you know, and I'm not perfect and I'm not all fine now. I still have my dark days. I still have my depression. I still have my ups and downs, and we all do. And trauma is relative. You know whatever you've been through, what I've been through, what the world's been through, it's how you handle it. So you know, I've been lucky, I guess, that I've been with some amazing therapists. I've got a great support group around me, which I think is most important now, is having that support group, your family, your friends, your partner, whoever it is, having that support around you who have your back, who believe you, who are there for you when you are, you know, when you're not doing so well. That's what's important now for me. And yeah, before I go off into a, you know, into my own little world, but yeah, that's kind of my story and why I needed to stop and get the help, because otherwise I was done.
Oh, man. So just your story overall is just, I mean, I was going through each, you know, part and just thinking about how pain really does cause this ripple through our lives, right? Until we can verbalize our pain, we are imprisoned to it. There's no way of getting around it because it's this monster within you that is just fighting to get out.
Yeah.
And while you were in that process, you know, because it was a long period of being in pain, how did you start relating to your family? Did your family see these changes within you? And how did you, because I mean, 8 years old, you're still so young. You're still so young. You still haven't formed your personality in the world. And so, do you remember how your family had started to relate to you? Do you remember any shifts, you know, when you became more withdrawn?
I you know, I guess I was a normal kid before that. Um, and I asked my parents, because part of my therapy was to speak to my parents and ask them what I was like as a child. And I've got the greatest parents in the world. You know, my parents are amazing and they're loving and they're beautiful and they're, you know, they'll always be there for me. But they just thought I was an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid who was just wanted to be on his own, was just a quiet little boy who didn't want affection by his parents. Because whenever my mum and dad would try and, you know, kiss me or hug me, I'd run away with it, and I'd run away from it and push away. Whereas my brother and sister at the time were all about that. And they just thought I was a quiet kid in my own little world who wanted to be on my own and play with my cars and watch movies on my own. And so they never thought anything of it. But when I finally came out to my parents and I told them what happened to me, the first thing my mother said was, "Wow, that explains everything about you," which just broke my heart. And I'm getting emotional now about it. Um, yeah, that my mother and my sister both said that, you know, that explains everything about you. Now we understand why you were the child you were. Now we understand why you just wanted to be by yourself. And I had friends and I would go and hang out with my friends, but it was always, what's the word I'm looking for here? It wasn't natural. There you go. It wasn't a natural thing for me to go and hang out with my friends and chill. And, you know, I remember at school, we'd have school discos, or all my friends at the time had girlfriends, and I never did. I never wanted one. I just wanted to be on my own. I didn't care for it because I had this man, all right? I was doing these other things. So I was so much more advanced than him. I thought I was a lucky one because I had someone who loved me. Um, Again, through the grooming and the manipulation, him telling me that he's the only one who loves me and how special I am and all that type stuff. So, but yeah, mainly it was just my parents and even my brother and sister to a certain extent were just saying, we just thought you were a quiet kid. And I just kept to myself. But then when I finally told them what happened to me, the first thing they said was, "Wow, that explains everything." now we understand why you were the kid you were. And I have no remorse against them. I don't blame them for anything. You know, it was me. It was my choice to keep it a secret. You know, at the time, because I thought I was going to save their life. And, you know, I didn't want them to get hurt or anything to happen to them. So for me, it was just, I was doing the right thing. I was doing the thing I needed to do to survive and for my family to survive. And if I need to push them away and not be close to them, then so be it. And that's how it was. I probably, I told them, I would have been, I can't remember exactly now, but it would have been 7, 8, 9 years ago was when I first told someone, when I first told my friend Sam in New York. That was the first time I came out and spoke about it. So it's, you know, it's from 8 through to about, let's say 32. So it was, you know, it was a while, it was a good few years. You know, 24, 25, 6 years. So it was a long time. And it did mess me up mentally. It did. You know, I guess suffered in all my relationships with women and trying to communicate and let them in. And I did let them in, but then as soon as they were in, I'd push them away. I'd only let them in that little bit and then build that wall, push them away. Couldn't communicate my feelings, couldn't open up, couldn't really give much. So it was a constant struggle.
I find it interesting that you said choice, you know, you said it was your choice to, you know, not tell them and to protect them. And it's just so interesting because I think of it as, I was listening to a psychologist the other day, and he was speaking about how our bodies go into this reflex when we experience trauma. And sometimes to protect us, our brain actually shuts down a certain aspect of it, of the memory aspect, so that we
Absolutely.
don't feel like we're enduring pain all the time, right? So you have to almost relook at and restructure what you're doing in order for your body to survive. And you go on to speak about, you know, your relationship with this man, your perpetrator, and how it actually, you started feeling like you had Stockholm syndrome. You actually felt like you care about this person. And so how did that end up unfolding? Like what ended up happening to him and your relationship?
So at first, yes, it was very violent and rough and you know, he would beat me up and, you know, throw me up against the wall and choke me out, and to the point where I'd be peeing my pants and, you know, struggling to breathe. And we would see each other, you know, over the 4 or 5 years, we would see each other. It was different. Maybe it'd be once a week to once a month to every 3 months to, you know, every 6 months to then again, I'd see him every second week. So it was just varied. It was never a constant, you know, this day, this time. And he would never kind of ask me questions about myself. He would never ask how I am, what's going on in my life, this, that, and the other. He would never give me food and drink when I was at his house. It was just kind of pretty much get over there, throw me around, beat me up a little bit, do what we do, and then that was it. To then him asking questions about me, him offering me food and drink and lollies and that kind of stuff. To the point where he said that he would come to my soccer games. I used to play soccer as a kid. So he would come to my games and, you know, on the sideline and watch, but I had no idea. But it was all through the, you know, I felt that love, and my love for him grew all through the grooming and manipulation. Again, it was all through that, through him saying that he's the only one who loves me, that I'm the only one that he loves, that I only love him, that my brothers and sisters hate me, that my parents hate me, that if anyone ever finds out, I'll go to jail. So just through that, I started to feel love for him, because he was the only one who loved me, and I loved him. So that's how it went. And then then he just kind of disappeared out of my life. He just kind of vanished, let's say. And I never saw him again. And it's so funny because I was a keynote speaker for a child abuse conference in America last year. And after I spoke, a man came up to me who was abused himself, and he said to me, do you know why he abandoned you? Do you understand why he abandoned you? And for all these years, I thought because maybe he got in trouble with the police, maybe he got caught with another boy, so he had to run away or he disappeared. And it just, what he said to me just kind of shook me, and it still plays on my mind, is that he said to me, no, the reason why he abandoned you is because you were getting older. You were a 12-year-old boy going on 13. You were getting hair on your body. You were starting to develop. You weren't a little boy anymore with little boy features. And it just kind of rocked me. And so, he moved on from me to another young little boy because I was now turning into a man, let's say. So for me to process that and for me to understand that, it took some time, and it just kind of hit me. So yeah, that's kind of where he left. And that's why I was, from 12 through for about 3 years, I was just so lost in the world, and I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't know who I belonged to and with, and sexuality and just everything.
That's so, like, I can't even begin to try and step into your shoes and, look at it through that lens, because it's like, we look at these things in society, right? And we look at these kind of, moments in one's life. And I mean, to go through so much from the age of 8, it's almost like it's pretty much your whole existence, right? Because prior to that, it was just like it's childhood and your formative years. And then from 8 onwards is it's being plagued by trauma in many ways. And so for parents or people out there, what kind of things do you say they should look out for if they feel like their child might have been or could be in the same situation?
I think the most important thing, and this is one thing that a counselor touched on at the conference last year, was that education is key. Education of parents and education of kids. And she said, and it's so simple, but I think parents and adults are still embarrassed to talk about it and embarrassed to talk to their children about it. And she said, one of the most important things a parent can do is, if they have a son, tell their son that it's a penis. Call it a penis. It's not a PP. It doesn't have a nickname, because it's a penis and it's your penis. It belongs to you. No one's allowed to touch that. If anyone does, you're allowed to, make sure you do tell. You're not going to get in trouble. We will believe you. Because I think that's a big thing, is that people still call it a PP. People still, joke about it and whatever you call it for a girl. But yeah, it's a penis and it's a vagina. It belongs to you. No one's allowed to touch it. No one's allowed to play with it. If someone touches you down there, it's wrong. Whereas parents still don't want to have that conversation with their children. Parents still want to call it a PP or whatever they want to call it. Still have nicknames for the genitalia. And I guess just like what I did, if you have a normal kid or a fun-loving kid who's running around, to all of a sudden kind of close off and push away, speak to him. I think that's the most important thing, is speak to him and believe him. Because like I said, my parents are amazing, but they didn't do that. They just thought I was a kid who was just a normal, quiet kid. So I think that's the most important thing for parents, is to communicate with their children, to educate themselves. Just, be more aware of their surroundings, of their teachers, of the church, of the people that they're hanging out with. If the kids go to summer camp, or if the kids go to the pool during the summer, or whatever the situation is, just be a little more aware. And I think if you communicate early enough with your children to say that it's your penis or it's your vagina, it belongs to you, they're your breasts, they're your ass, your backside, sorry. If you communicate that with your children, they're going to understand. They're going to know what's kind of more what's right and wrong, that it does belong to them, that it doesn't belong to these men or to these women or to whoever it is that is abusing them or touching them inappropriately. So I think, and I've been told, and just listening to these counselors and stuff at these seminars, that it's all about communication and it's all about education. If the parents can educate themselves, if the parents can educate the children, it'll go a long, long way. And I think it does start by calling it a penis and calling it a vagina and knowing or letting the kids know that it belongs to them, that no one's allowed to touch it. That it's not, because I've got nephews and, my little nephews, when they're at the toilet, they play with it. Because even I did. I think every young boy plays with their penis because it's this little thing that's, hanging out. So as long as we educate them and tell them, listen, this is what it is. No one's allowed to touch it. No one's allowed to play with it. No one's allowed to touch you down there. Or, if you feel scared or if someone has done something, talk to us. And I think parents are still embarrassed or ashamed, or they just don't want to have that conversation, which is crazy.
Man, so I think, what I'm hearing is like whenever we classify things as taboo and we do it for our own comfort, right? We don't want to speak about it because it's uncomfortable for me. It then creates a bigger problem whereby now it is the fastest growing industry in the world because we just don't want to, we pretend like it doesn't exist. And so if we dig our heads deep enough in the sand, we're hoping that it will just disappear on its own and people will just be better. And so, I mean, this is a very, very difficult conversation to be having, especially around the world.
Absolutely.
And for you to be traveling and, being an advocate and, being someone who brings the uncomfortable conversation to people. How do you find that people receive that? Like when you tell people, what are the general reactions you're getting?
Like you just said, people don't want to have the conversation and run away. And no, I don't want to hear this and it's too much for me and I'm sorry. And other people are like, wow, I want to help, or wow, that's so interesting to me. And it's been amazing because I think you read my article and some of that email I sent you with the 3 different situations. When that article came out about 2 years ago, I've had over 200-300 people now reach out and say the exact same thing happened to them, that I've given them the power to now tell their story, to speak to their family, that I've saved their lives, that, whatever the situation is. So I think, what was your question?
Sorry. No, that's great. No,
people's reaction. Yes. So I think a lot of people are very happy that I've brought up this conversation with them and that I am having it and that we are allowed to talk about it now because it is freeing for them. And so many men have told me that they did the exact same thing I did, that they were beating men up, that they were doing, going through the drugs and the violence and everything else I did. So yeah, people's reaction, it just varies. I think, there's a lot of people out there who are a little more educated and cultured and they get it and they understand. There's a lot of people out there who aren't so educated and they don't know how to talk about it. So it is tough because, even with some of my partners, some of my girlfriends, I've had girlfriends or girls that I'd be dating and I wouldn't tell them my story, or they wouldn't know, or they'd find out or online or however they found out. Some of them would say, Nathan, you're amazing and I think you're great and I'm so happy and privileged to be with you. But then 2 weeks later, they'll say, oh, I can't do this. This is too much for me. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to process it. So I think it's just, everyone's different. Some people are all about it. And yes, let's talk about this and let's raise awareness and, let's do the right thing. Whereas other people just want to stick their head in the sand because they don't know how to process it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to talk about it. So it's difficult sometimes. And even me, I sometimes don't want to talk about it because it is so heavy. It is so full on and exhausting. And, it does bring up triggers and past trauma and what have you. So it is a very difficult situation. And you even said that yourself, you touched on it yourself. So yeah, it's a tough one, but it is getting easier, I think, because of the way the world is. People are a lot more open and accepting, and they want to learn about these things. They want to educate themselves on these matters. So it is getting easier. And that's why, I wrote my book. That's why I wrote my memoir. I was offered a contract by a publishing house to write my memoir. And for a long time, I was umming and ahhing. I'm like, oh, fuck me, to have to write that now and to go back there and do that. but it was one of the best things I've ever done because I learned so much about myself. It was so therapeutic and cathartic, and I grew so much as a person. And you know, through writing the book and through the therapies and through everything I've done, I now know who I am as a person. I now know what I want in my life. I I I don't care about ego and quantity. It's all about quality now over quantity. For me now, it's just about peace. I just want some peace and happiness and joy in my life and love because I've never had that. I didn't know how to get that. And again, through the grooming and manipulation, I deserve to fail. I deserve to have hate in my life, and I don't deserve to be happy. I deserve to lose that job. I deserve to lose that girlfriend. I deserve to be miserable. You know, I deserve bad things. And that was my mentality for 20 years, 30 years of my life, until literally the last, you know, 2, 3, 4 years of my life. And I've grown exponentially, and I've learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about life and about humans and about relationships and communication and toxic masculinity, which is such a huge thing as well.
Mm.
You know, because for men, obviously toxic masculinity is a big thing where we don't talk about our problems. We keep it inside. You know, me and thousands and thousands of men who have been abused, we don't want to talk about it because it's going to make us look weak. Whereas what I've learned in life now and what I've discovered is that I'm more of a man because I talk about my feelings. I'm more of a man because I understand who I am as a person. I know what I want in the world. I know what I need, what's going to make me happy. And it's not a matter of wants. It's a matter of just taking a step back and breathing and just being at peace with where I am. So, you know, I think that makes me more of a man than someone who keeps it all inside and is like, no, fuck that, you know, that I'm a man. I don't talk about my stuff, but it's just wrong. You can't live like that because you're just building up more trauma and more shame and more guilt and more hatred for yourself, but for the rest of the world. And you just end up in the place I was, in the gutter, or, you know, abusing someone or killing someone or killing yourself, and the drugs and the violence and, you know, what have you. So just through this whole process, and I've learned so much about myself. So yeah, to go back to your original question, some people like it, some people can handle it, some people can't. It's sorry, I went off.
I absolutely love it.
I guess I'm a little bit passionate about this, and it's who I am now, and it's, you know, I've what happened to me happened for a reason, and the reason why it happened to me is to tell my story, is to educate the world, is to help people.
No, I absolutely love that you know you are so passionate and that you can be so expressive, because the one thing I know for sure about shame is that it minimizes us, right? And I always say to people, it is so much better to be at war with the world than it is to be at war with yourself. Because at least if it's external, you've got that thing and that thing that you can externally exert that force on. However, when it's internal, there's nothing you won't destroy. There's nothing, especially yourself, right? Because you want the world around you to reflect the pain within. And so when things are going good in your life, you're like, how do I destroy this? Because it's not going to last. And if I get ahead of
Yeah,
it, then it won't impact me. When the truth is, all you're doing is you're creating a cycle of pain for yourself and for those around you. So I love that you touched on that especially in South Africa now, what we deal with is gender-based violence more so. And it's an issue whereby you do see a lot of unhealed men exerting their force because they're not healed. They're living in pain. And so they're like, oh, you know, I'm beating my wife or beating this person. It's the weaker of the two, right? And so toxic masculinity is a conversation more men should be having. And I'm so grateful that you are having these conversations and you are saying, look, men should talk about their emotions. I don't even know where this came from, that men should be these ironclad titans, you know? And it's like, no, please speak, say something, you know, use your words, you know?
absolutely. It's it is it's such a simple thing, but we can complicate it so much by ego and all the noise and the background noise in our head and the voices. And, you know, if we just speak about our problems, that's, if we first speak about it, that's 95% of it. 95% is finally coming out and saying, I was raped, or whatever the situation is, whatever you're going through. And then the rest, it just, obviously it doesn't get easier because there's still a long journey to go, but that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing is coming out the first time. And one of the most important things I learned in therapy was, you know, my therapist, I love her to death, and she's passed away, God bless her. She said to me, and this is 5, 6, 7 years ago now, she said, Nathan, if you can go back at this age and speak to your 8-year-old self, what would you tell him? And I would and ah about it. And I was like, holy fuck, I don't know. I'm like, shit, what would I say? What would I say? And she would kick my ass and really get into me and say, come on, Nathan, fucking what would you say to yourself? And it finally got to me. It finally hit me. And as soon as I realized it, as soon as I said it, it was such a weight off my shoulders. It was such a release. And the thing that I discovered, the thing that I said was, it's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. And as soon as I discovered it wasn't my fault, life opened up. My healing and my journey, it opened up so much, because like I said earlier, I deserve to fail. I deserve to have bad things happen to me. This is what, you know, I deserve to be raped. I deserve to be beaten up. I deserve to, whatever the situation is. But as soon as I realized it wasn't my fault, all those thoughts started going away. All those thoughts started disappearing. So that was one of the most important things I learned in this whole journey, was that it wasn't my fault, because throughout the whole thing, it was my fault. I deserved this. Again, through what this man would tell me, you deserve this. And he would say to me that I picked him up at the pool, that he would say to me that I was looking at him, and I'm like, well, no. And I remember I was like, no, I wasn't. I never saw you. I don't know you. I don't, you know, but again, just through the grooming and manipulation, it was what I kind of started to believe and started to think. And then just, you know, I hated myself, and I had so much shame, and I wanted to kill myself, and the drugs. And that was all just an escape for me, just to get away from my head and get away from my memories. And that's why I'd start watching so many movies as a kid. And that's why my love for acting now, and writing films and theater and producing it, that's where all that came from. Because for so many years, I would just sit in my room or sit in my parents' room and just watch movie after movie after movie. I wanted to escape into that world and disappear into that world and be that person and just get away from my life. So yeah, the most important thing was for me was to learn that it wasn't my fault. And then it just kind of grew from there.
Wow. You know, you touch on this so beautifully, which is a question of worthiness, right? Deserving, like I deserve this, so I don't deserve this. And I think it brings us down to every single human being who's walking the planet. All of us want to know, do you hear me? Do you see me? Right? And am I worthy? Am I worthy? And I think that either you are asking that consistently and it's being questioned since, you know, a child, or it's something that comes up, whether it's a project you want to have, that dream you want to accomplish, that thing, you know, that person you love. Like, am I worthy of being in this person's life? We're always asking ourselves these things. And I think when it's based in trauma, it becomes so much more pervasive, because it's not just that question of, am I worthy in the small thing? It's like, but I've gone through so much trauma. How can I be worthy? That becomes more the narrative. And so I want to know, were there particular, you spoke about, you know, going back to your 8-year-old self and, you know, telling yourself it wasn't your fault. Are there any other practices that you still do that are helping you on your healing journey up till this day?
Good question. Yeah, there are. There's a lot of things that I do. But I think it's more just internally and what I do. And I think for me is kind of, you know, when I start to get depressed and when I start to feel down and when I'm kind of losing my shit and I want to act out or whatever my situation is, the most important thing for me is just to take a step back, is to breathe and to look at it from outside myself. Look at it as, so what am I going through? What's Nathan going through right now? And how can I deal with it? And how can I, move on from that and get over it? And like I said in the very beginning, is to just make sure you have that good base around you. So when I'm going through things, or when I'm, not feeling well and in a bad place, I'll speak to someone. I'll go and see my therapist. I'll speak to my best friend. I'll, it's still hard. I don't really speak to my parents about that stuff as much, but I speak to my sister a lot about it, my brother. But it's just about knowing when something's coming on, knowing when I'm feeling down and feeling bad, and just, even whether I write it down or I just process it and take it in. I let it come in. I take it in. I let it sit inside of me, and then I just kind of let it go again. And I think that's important. Is just you have to let it in. You have to kind of see what it is, see what's going on. Because otherwise, like you said, you just push it down, and it just internally it builds and builds and builds until you erupt. So for me, it's about just, what's the word? Just kind of taking it in, processing it, seeing what it is, what it's doing to me, how I'm feeling, and then going down the avenue I need to go down, speaking to the person I need to speak to. Or, I go to the gym a lot. I keep myself fit. I go to the gym, or I'll do some boxing, or I'll do what I need to do to get over it. I'll write about it. So yeah, I think, everyone's different, obviously, and each to their own. But for me, it's about just letting it sink in, thinking about it, seeing what it is internally, and then letting it go. And I do constantly repeat to myself that it wasn't my fault, that what's going on isn't my fault, that, I can move forward with it. I learn from it. It's going to make me grow. I let it sink in. I'll take it on, and then I grow, and to make sure it doesn't happen again. And sometimes it doesn't happen. We're not perfect. Sometimes we let it in, and it takes over our life, and we do lose our shit, or we do kind of go down that bad road. But if that does happen, again, you need to learn from it. You need to think about why and how, and what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Yeah, that's a really hard question. You kind of got me on that.
No, but it's fantastic, because I think you touched on the things that I think are so crucial, which is not necessarily saying, oh, this isn't a positive thought, I need to like chase it out with a pitchfork, but instead saying, where in me is this triggering? Because I found that there's always a trigger, right? And whether that thought is like, it's a work-related thing, or it's a love-related thing, whatever it is for you in that moment, you have to look within and say, oof, that doesn't feel good. Why doesn't it feel good? Because the last time I was in love, this person taught me I wasn't worthy. Ooh, is that true? Am I not worthy? How did that unfold? And you have to kind of just sit with it, process it. Sometimes you just have to feel the sadness. Sometimes you have to be like, oh, I didn't cry that time around. Let me just cry. And not a cute cry like that.
You do. You've got to sit with it. And if it makes you cry, if it makes you depressed, if you don't want to see anyone for a day or two, that's okay. But just sit with it and learn from it, and grow from it. Learn about yourself. Just grow, because I think that's the most important thing for me as well, is that I've grown so much as a person just through learning about myself, learning about the world, learning how people communicate, how people act, how about ego as well. And ego is such an important thing in the world to so many people. But letting go of ego is such a release, and just such a release. It's freeing.
I love that you speak about ego, because there is, right? Like, and for people who don't understand ego, because most people have this idea of ego as this, you walk in and you're like machismo or whatever it is. But ego is the part of ourselves that we reflect to the world, that we don't want to crack the facade, right? The inauthentic version of ourselves that we're so afraid of getting criticized for. We're so afraid. So it's our armor. It's our armor in the world. And so when we move through the world, and I think all of us will always have elements of ego, of course, it serves us, it's a human need, it's something we need. However, if we just purely operate from that place, then it becomes very difficult to really deal with your own emotion and your own sense of self, right? And we were speaking about, releasing and allowing emotions to happen and then speaking about it. For people who aren't comfortable, with the idea of telling other people their problems or what they're going through, how do you recommend, because you were a shy guy or you were a shy kid, how do you recommend they begin forming these relationships whereby they can start maybe being more open in gradual ways?
I think writing, if you can't speak to people, is to write about it first, because that is going to open you up, and then through that you will eventually be able to speak to someone. And that's hard, because if you're not willing, if you can't open up, and if you don't know how to talk or to communicate about your feelings and what you're going through, it's a tough one. But I think eventually you need to do that, because otherwise it is going to kill you. Whether you do it with your family, and if you can't do it with your family, like I said, therapy saved my life. Seeing a therapist, or speaking to your best friend, or speaking to a teacher, to your boss, to someone that you trust, someone that you know. And that's how I kind of started my writing journey, was at my therapist, because I couldn't talk about it, or I pushed things so far down that my therapist said to me, Nathan, just start writing things down and we'll talk about it next week. So he would kind of give me a subject to talk about, or to write about, the week before. And then I'd write about it and think about it. And he would ask me questions that I didn't know the answer to. So he would make me go away and think about it, write about it. And then we talk about it the following week. So writing was a big thing for me. Because I guess, I don't know what else there is. If you're not writing, or if you're not speaking about it, yes, you can journal, or yes, you can do a blog, or yes, you can, do a podcast or something. But as long as you can get it out somehow, even if it is through, like I said, through going to the gym, through some kind of release, you need to release it, because again, it's just going to bottle up inside and do you. So I think you just kind of need to have some form of communication with yourself, or some form of release within yourself, so that you can express how you're feeling. And even if it is, like I said, beating the absolute shit out of a boxing bag, or lifting heavy weights, or going for a run as faster and longer than you normally would, just to kind of get that release, that endorphin, that rush, that to push out that shame and the trauma and the depression, or whatever it is that you're feeling. And then hopefully it'll gradually build from there, and you will be able to speak about it. And I think also what's very important is communicating with yourself, is understanding yourself, and understanding when you do have these things coming on, like we just spoke about. When you realize it, then you can kind of deal with it, and kind of what to do, and you can go to the gym, or you can go for a run, or you can speak to someone. So I think that's very important as well, is kind of understanding your body, understanding who you are, and when these things come on. Does that kind of answer it?
Great. That's great. And you actually also touched on something else that struck me as you were speaking, which was giving the situation or context meaning. And I found this to be particularly true for me as well. When something that goes wrong, or something doesn't work out, and I give it a meaning. And whether that meaning is, oh, something better's coming, or it taught me to be this, or, I'm so much smarter for that incident having occurred, or now this is my life purpose. I get to help people and teach people. It allows me to move through life a lot lighter and a lot more purpose driven, giving it a purpose, giving it a meaning, instead of just being like, oh, these are just unrelated, incidents that just harm me. And, so I think for me, what I found to be particularly healing is to give context and meaning to certain situations. And when I've read other people or Holocaust survivor stories, there's a book called The Choice. And then there's also a book by Viktor Frankl called A Man's Search for Meaning. And it's all of it combined shows that when people who have experienced excessive trauma give those traumatic incidents meaning, they actually survive longer in the camps. And I thought, whoa, this makes so much more sense, right? Unlike just
Yeah.
living in a randomized universe where nothing means anything and the pain is all there is. Then it's just like, oh, I don't want to be here.
Exactly that. Because I think if you give it meaning, you give it life, and you can then let it go. You can then move on from it. You can then learn, move forward. Because people always say to me, and this is a big thing, and I guess this kind of relates to what you just touched on. Not people always say, I have had some people say to me, just get over it, move on. Just, get over it. What the fuck are you doing? Stop thinking about it. Stop living in that past. But it's part of my DNA. It's part of who I am. It's a part of me, and it's always going to be a part of me. So I'm never going to get over it as such. I can learn from it, and I can move forward with it. It's like I said, it's who I am as a person. It's part of my DNA. It's part of my genetic makeup now, so to speak. So yes, I'm never going to forget about it, but I can live with it. I can learn from it, and I can move forward with it. And that's what I've done. And that's why I'm kind of on this journey now, because I've learned about it. I've lived with it. I've grown with it and from it. And I know who I am as a person. And for me now, that's just me moving on. And it doesn't define who I am. It's a chapter of my life. It's who I was. It was something that happened to me when I was a kid, and that I went through for a few years. But I have so many more things going on. I have this book coming out, but I'm writing, I'm acting, I'm producing, I'm organizing this global march. I'm an activist, and so there's other things about me. I'm not Nathan Spireti, the guy who was raped. I'm Nathan Spiteri, the actor, the writer, the producer who was raped. And I think that's what people need to learn, is that don't let it define you. Don't let it be who you are, because it's just going to be so heavy and sink you and bring you down. And like you said about the Holocaust survivors and people in those concentration camps, that they learned from it and they processed it, and then they moved on and they survived longer, which is amazing, which is just ridiculous.
Oh, Nathan, I could speak to you all day, because you're just such a well of wisdom, but more so you are, I love how you narrate something so painful in a way that is, something we can hear, we can look at, we can see how we can play our parts in. And I just thank you for it. I thank you for giving your story the meaning of helping, because I'm pretty sure you're going to help, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people through your story, whether it's through them reading it, them coming, to the marches, whichever way they're exposed to you. You sharing of yourself is just such a blessing. And I just want to thank you for it.
Thank you so much. And that really does mean a lot. And just if I can say one last thing, that it's an everyday thing. I'm learning every day. I'm growing every day, and it's hard every day. It's not easy, and you don't just move forward and it's done. So give yourself a breather, give yourself a bit of a break, and just take a step back. And like I said, and just don't let it fucking bring you down and consume you too much. Just like I said, let it come in, let it think, and let it sit in your body, see where it sits, and what triggers and trauma and all that stuff, and then grow from it, learn from it, because it's something that I'll be doing forever and growing from and learning from, and it's a never ending thing. So I really appreciate your kind words, and thank you so much, and let's do it again in a few more years, and we'll see where we're both at. And thank you.
And I'd love that. Thank you, Nathan. And I'm just glad you said it online, so that, when you have like exploded into the stratosphere, you're not like, who's that again?
Did I really say that? I didn't say that.
Wow. I'm so honored to have had this time, this conversation, an opportunity to learn something that I would have never actually gone into, because for me, one of my biggest sensitivities is anything to do with children. So yeah, this was a really incredible interview for me. I mean, not only did we learn about the activism Nathan does, but I also learned about staying in your body, staying in your emotions. And I think that's a huge takeaway. So guys, as usual, I will speak to you next week. And don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Speak to you soon.